and welcome to episode 3 of the Circus of Fools podcast series that Jim and I will be doing throughout this election. As fun as it is, we are, of course, the i5 podcast team. This is the Circus of Fools. I'm here with my co-host Jim. How are you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm doing all right.
And this week we're going to be covering the two debates that were on last week because why not? We could use a good laugh. So let's just go straight into it. Just a bit of background information, though, quickly about the actual debate itself. So rather than go straight into the debate, I just want to discuss something that came out of the debate that was kind of a key highlight. And yeah, we'll talk about how it was brought in because Jim, you'll have noticed this as well because you watched them. The figure of £2,094 that was made, I think, 4 minutes into the debate from Sunak. So during the debate, Sunak immediately started spewing out and repeating a £2,000 tax line. I don't think this was so much panic in the moment, but rather the last option, the repetition of it all the way through, and it even went into the BBC debate. It's desperate campaign rhetoric in which they will repeat this until the population believes it, and it will be a shield to cover the past 14 years of their destruction of the country. The Tories tried this back in 1992 during that election, and quite frankly, it worked. It convinced the public that Kinnock would raise taxes to pay for the welfare system, so they are trying it again. Just before I go into how they've arrived at this number, Jim, did you pick up on that as well? All the way through the debate, Sunak just constantly prattled on with this £2,000 number.
Yeah, this was a very prominent point. But I
Mm,
want to say something for the debate in general, especially
mm,
this one. I mean, as you may know, we are on Pride Month at the moment. And the
yep.
fact that we have the debates on the same month, I don't think is by chance or coincidence. Because honestly, for the life of us, I couldn't hear any of these two giving a straight answer about anything.
No.
So yeah, it was basically a sausage fest. Honestly, you
Yeah.
would have more fun looking at tennis match between two amputees
Yep.
because the general gist of it was okay, you're shit and I'm better. And then the response would be, yeah, no, you're more shit and I'm better.
Yep.
Whereas the questions would be, serious questions about how are you going to solve the serious problems that the
Mm,
country is dealing with at the societal level and the
mm,
economy. They were like, oh, it's not our fault, it's that you're shit. No, you're shit. And it was just this sort of
mm.
exchange back and
Yeah.
forth throughout the debate. I will say the BBC one was a little bit more interested, but
Mm,
considering that Sunak and Stammer, so these two seem to be the strongest, like most important, quote unquote, candidates leading the election. This was
mm.
absolutely disgraceful. Also, for a
Yeah.
small side note, this is actually the first year, or rather, first election that I personally follow politics as close as I will, because I didn't
Mm,
usually to pay attention and also take in mind that I'm not British per se,
mm.
so I'm a little bit sluggish when it comes to British politics in general.
On, no worries.
Just a little, disclaimer because I may say some stuff that may be inaccurate or I might get confused. This is the reason why. It's not that I am biased towards
Mm,
or one political party or the other, and it's not the
mm.
case that I have an agenda. I
Yep.
do have
Not to worry.
opinions, but
Mm.
yeah.
Yep. Not to worry.
In any case, yeah.
Like I
Back
said,
to
well.
the debate. Yeah, it was
Mm,
a very, very boring one, very boring
mm,
exchange, and honestly, I feel ashamed, borderline ashamed, living in a country where the two most famous candidates, leading
mm.
candidates, behave and talk like 5-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, that was the case, and I was actually going to get into that as well just after this because this £2,000 point was so prevalent. I actually wanted to debunk it because it was a major lie that Sunak kept on hiding behind, and it also gives rise to the practice of how they actually come up with these figures. So before we get more in depth into the debate, the figure was from a document, and the document in question was published by the Treasury. The figure that it's based on, sorry, are heavily influenced and driven by conservative special advisors. This debunks the claim that Sunak made that it's an independent source. It's not. and the nature of this costing is uncertain, and it's also driven by assumptions by specialist advisors within the Tory party. So even if it was objective, it's based on the criteria and assumptions and predictions that they give. Also, as well, the prediction was for that £2,000 amount over 4 to 5 years, not one, which, to be honest, isn't that much if true. And add to this, Darren Grimes of Labour received a letter from the civil service saying that they didn't provide the Tories with that figure. And it's also suspected that Sunak was told not to say that. And lastly, the basis of these policy cost predictions, is based on the assumption and spin of the incumbent government. Both Labour and the Tories have produced these kinds of documents in the past when they've been in power. So even the premise of these documents should be looked upon with the utmost scrutiny. And I'm being polite, and that's a polite way of putting it. The advisors in question are people like Dominic Cummings. He's not in office right now, but it's people. It's people who are similar to him, hold similar kinds of relationships with the politicians as he did. The media, not during the debate, but after, the media were quick to point this out. Victoria Derbyshire called it out on the BBC as well as LBC as well. And, there was even an interview where a Tory ran away from an LBC presenter because he couldn't defend this. And why am I just getting this one out the way now? Because this was so prevalent through this debate and the BBC one that I don't want to trip up every time. I don't want to trip up on the podcast every time and go through this to debunk it. This is the tagline that they're adopting. They're still spewing it out and regurgitating it. And it's completely debunked. It's a lie. And for the first 30 minutes, Starmer didn't deny this, but I'll go into this a bit later. I think it was more because the ITV host wouldn't actually let him. And once he did respond, and he did deny it and debunked it, but he should have talked over the host. But I just wanted to talk about the host, Jim, if that was all right first, just for a few minutes, because there's some backstory I think you should probably know about. That she has a backstory you should probably know about. And I remembered her, and I found all of this out. I remembered some of this, but found more of it out. So the host was Julie Etchingham, and funny story about potential bias here. I say that because political allegiances can change for journos when they know the politicians personally like that, but it can be on being simple as well. It can't just be Labour or Tory. They can like certain politicians. But at one point, right, she used to work for Sky. This is the host of the ITV one between Sunak and Starmer. She used to work for Sky as a presenter. And in the 2000s, David Cameron was making a speech about action against immigration. It was his first one. And he said something like, "We have a solution for immigration." She didn't realize her mic was on, and all you heard was her saying, "Extermination." Clear as day. And it leaked on air.
Sounds like a plan, if you ask me.
Yep. And she got suspended for it. But that's the background. None of that was mentioned. And there is some criticism to be made about her conduct. Just a quick point. If you actually notice, and this goes into the format, if you actually notice, the questions were given to her, and then she would repeat the questions. And I think she was a filter to actually spin them in such a way that would be friendly to both politicians and the mainstream narrative, should they get a question from an audience member that didn't quite fit that narrative. And there's an example of that. She was given a question on Gaza, and the guy asked about what was happening in Gaza, and she respun the question, changed it, and fed it to the politicians to be more friendly to their narratives. The guy asked about what the crimes in Gaza, and then she added in the 7th of October killings, and then basically went into and referred to the Gaza and what's happening in Gaza as the aftermath. Now that might be a minor thing to some people, but whether you like it or not, she did change that guy's question. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I think this happened quite a few times where they either changed the question or they started rambling about something completely irrelevant to the question that was asked.
Yep.
And yeah, this happens in debates quite often, I think. But
Oh
yeah.
yeah. And then before we start like really tearing into the politicians, just lastly, before we get onto that segment, I just wanted to talk about the format. This format, what you said, Jim, at the start was very valid, and this format was basically just begging for it, and it caused a lot of problems. So to start with, the problems I had with the format, the audience would ask a question, which is fine, and then she would regurgitate it eventually because she was the filter to make sure the questions were acceptable to the politicians and make sure the audience didn't throw any curveballs to the politicians. We've already went into that. The 45-second time limit on initial answers wasn't really enough for either politician to say anything meaningful, and it was just more a framework to create clips and sound bites for social media. They would make their clips and sound bites for social media. They wouldn't answer the questions, as you rightfully said. And then once those 45 seconds were over, they'd just start squabbling with each other and talking over each other. And she would, like a school teacher, have to get them back on track and ask the questions. And also her conduct, she was so, I don't know if it was biased or she was just rigid with the structure, but if you actually notice, once that £2,000 accusation was made, Starmer said a couple of times, "Can I respond to that? Can I respond to that?" And she would say, "No, we'll get to taxes later." Now, that's not correct. There was an accusation made against Starmer that was incorrect, and he should have been allowed to refute that. That should have overridden the structure of topics, but she wouldn't let him. And he did that. She did that quite a few times. It wasn't until half an hour in that he finally spoke over her and said, "No, I am going to have to respond to this." And he was very articulate with the way that he did it. He commented on the nature of the source, but she did shut him down on several occasions when he tried before that. Maybe he should have been more aggressive. But also, as well, there was no mechanism in this debate to fact check any lies that were told during this debate. And in this era of technology, she can have an earpiece in. They can have teams fact checking the lies. They'll have had leaks about what the Tory or the Labour politicians were going to say. To be honest, the format of the debate wasn't great.
Another
You
thing, though, is that they mentioned fact checkers twice,
know?
but I'm not sure because, well, I'm not sure. They did mention the fact checkers, like, oh, you'll be giving a lot of work for our fact checkers, but at
That
the end
was
of
the
the day,
big.
I don't
Mm,
think we would be able to see the result of these fact checks, at least not immediately.
mm. I mean, the BBC were onto it straight away with theirs, but you have professional people doing research, but there was just no way to fact check anything they were saying because, I mean, I was watching it saying, well, this isn't correct, that's not correct for a start. There were a lot of lies.
And
But
also, don't forget 40 seconds.
true, but the debate went on for an hour and a half or something like that. So you could have the host just basically say something you said earlier that's been fact checked, and you respond to the fact check.
Yeah,
So
true.
that's how they did it in the BBC. So this wasn't a great format. And what they don't have on their side either is, well, maybe they're new to debates. We've done leadership debates before. Leadership debates have been done in multiple different countries. Western media does them all the time. I'm sure other medias do in other parts of the world. Media companies know how to put on a debate. Like I said, this one seemed more just to be designed around allowing, because this is what the politicians did. They never answered questions. They would just give slogans, they would just give sound bites in the hope that it would get on social media. And I kind of got the impression that they knew that a lot of people wouldn't really watch this. They would just watch highlights. So the politicians were just trying to create a highlight reel, if that makes sense, where the questions wouldn't even be in the highlight reel, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally.
My opinion on this, I thought there were some good exchanges, which I'll go into a bit later, but it was, as I say, mainly sound bites and slogans and policies that were semi-relevant, being used as responses to questions rather than any of the questions actually being answered in a direct way. Both politicians did this. Also, both spoke in broad, generalized statements without any specific ideas or policies on how to actually change anything. Brexit was not mentioned at all, and that's agreeing with what you said earlier.
It's funny, Brexit wasn't mentioned at all, but everyone kept jumping on about immigration, that it's the
Mm,
future of the country somehow, even
yeah,
though immigration would have the opposite effect, considering that most of the immigrants that are coming in are legal and they live on benefits.
yeah.
Anyways, that's a bit of a personal opinion. But yeah,
Valid.
Brexit seems
No.
to be more of a forbidden topic at the moment because
Mm,
everyone knows the cheat show, and this is a failure not only of the current government but
mm,
of the whole like parliament in general because
mm,
Tories were involved that were the ruling party.
mm,
The Labour was also involved that were the opposition, and both of them failed.
yeah. The thing is with immigration as well, it's a very broad thing. A lot of the illegal ones coming over in the boats, a lot of them are just ending up on benefits in hotels because their applications are taking so long to be processed. Just have to say for the Channel End, there are a lot of immigrants who come in legally and they do actually get jobs and work a lot of jobs that UK residents don't want to do. And like I said, this kind of detailed discussion we just weren't seeing there. I to be honest, just a disclaimer for the channel as well. now we're going to go into the exchanges and what was said and how they interacted in more detail. But we fully understand that neither really functioned within the framework of the debate. And we also acknowledge that neither really answered any questions or made any real attempt to do so. And we're also aware that they squabbled with each other, and very few times did they actually stick to the 45 seconds. So, in terms of like following the format, answering the questions from the audience, both of them were shit. Starmer was slightly less shit than Rishi Sunak, but we fully appreciate they didn't follow the format. So now I was planning on moving on to the actual exchanges themselves and some of the details of what was said as a few examples. Are you okay with that, Jim?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So for me, both Starmer and Sunak were charismatic black holes. During the opening statement, Starmer sounded like a robot, and Sunak sounded like he was talking to a child with a very monotone middle manager voice. Also, the physical mannerisms as well they both had, like Starmer would just nod head forward, hand movements, nod head forward again, and then do a dramatic hand down while stepping back from the podium to try and be dramatic. And it just looked like they were drilled by the same person.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mm,
also, I would say Sunak didn't just seem like he was talking to a child, he seemed like a talking child.
mm,
Both of them, as I said earlier, they behaved like children,
yeah.
and it was like a dick sizing competition, really. No, my dick is
Mm-hmm.
bigger, yours is smaller. No, my dick is bigger, yours is smaller.
You,
And all that while avoiding answering the question that was asked
yeah.
and sometime going into tantrum. This should be banned. Like as soon as you do this, you should be
Mm.
just be an automatic forfeit. You know what? Fuck you. You're being an idiot.
Well,
There's no way someone like you behaving like this, answering like that, should be
mm,
allowed to run for a
yep.
presidency.
Now we're going to get into why they weren't answering the questions. So, for example, I'm just going to put myself on the line here. I don't think any of them did particularly well. I think Starmer, for me, came out of this looking slightly less worse than Sunak, and I have a few reasons as to why I think that. Mainly because he was able to shoot through some of Sunak's narratives, because that was the thing. Sunak was giving these narratives that just didn't represent reality when he was answering these questions, and Starmer was able to shoot them down. He didn't answer the question, but at least he was able to shoot these stupid narratives down. So, for example, one thing Sunak said throughout this debate was, it's about the future, not about the past, which is absurd because part of the reasoning for your vote is based on the actions of the government's last term. That's one of the reasons for an election. You are basing them on what they've done over the course of their term and whether you want them to stay in to do more. Now, the real reason that Sunak doesn't want this made about the past is because he knows he's going to lose hands down because of the amount of damage that his party have done. They've been in the last 14 years. The state of the country right now is their fault. They've been in for too long. So, of course, he doesn't want to talk about the past, except for the following things: furlough. That was the only thing he ever talked about. To this woman who had debt and was starving and couldn't afford to live, basically, because all of her money was going on food. Very serious question. Well, I did a lot. I did furlough back in the pandemic, and inflation's going down, which goes into a point I'll get into a bit later. But yeah, of course he doesn't want the past talked about. They like I said, they've been in. And Sunak's entire thing now is based on, if we get in again, then we'll start fixing everything. But Labour will actually choke out all of the things that we're doing. You've had 14
Uh,
years. Why weren't you doing this before?
yeah, like I think the argument is more like whatever we did actually just now starts to work, and if you
Mm,
don't vote us in,
yeah.
Labour is gonna do all the work, all the foundation
Mm,
that we've been doing. So
yeah.
therefore, you would start back to square one, which will lead to poverty. So don't
It's
vote
all he
Labour
has.
because we're better. But it's such a stupid argument
Hmm.
because if what you did was actually working, you wouldn't have to reiterate that it's working.
Yeah.
Also, you would have more
Yeah.
tangible evidence and information and examples to show of what it is that it's working. Because saying generally, "Oh, our plan is working," well, what is your plan? What is actually
Mm.
working? Like,
Um, like a big, like I thought Starmer did well when he just said the reason why, your Rwanda flights are going to start taking off after the election is because you've got no idea that they're going to work. So you don't dare test them out before the election just in case they fail again. And I thought that was spot on.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
really is.
and that was the right thing to say. He's delaying a lot of what he's doing to say that they will work because he knows they're not going to. That there's a lot to say on Sunak's policies, and we'll get through it really quickly.
But
And
just
again,
really quickly, it goes
mm,
back to what we said on the previous episode,
yeah,
where we suspected Sunak knows he's going to lose,
mm,
and therefore he's trying to get in as many stupid policies as he can,
yeah,
which are going to cause problems and mess to the
yeah,
next government, which
mm-hmm,
will give him or his party leeway to do a quote unquote good job as an opposition and be like, you know what, you see what's happening when Labour is on
mm-hmm.
power.
Well,
So yeah,
another, oh yeah, and a key point as well is Keir Starmer made it. Why do you think he's called the election now? And of course, Keir Starmer answered it. He said, he's called the election now because, well, he knows things are going to get worse, and he doesn't want to be in power when they do. That's why he's done it now because he knows if he calls an election after the next few months, he's definitely going to lose. Don't get me wrong, the Tories are fucked in this election. I know that, but things are going to get so bad if they do have any chance of winning. They're better off doing it now than after the next few months where things are really going to go downhill with food prices and things. And I thought Starmer, while he didn't say some of the reasons why that's going to be the case, that was still the right response to that when he said that. And then when Sunak tried to joke, saying, "Oh well, I call an election now. You complain about it. You wanted us to call one sooner. You didn't complain. You complained about that, and you complain when I call an election. What am I supposed to do?" Which didn't really answer the accusation that he's only doing it now because things are going to get a lot worse in the next couple of months because of them. So Sunak just he was. Did you see how red his eyes were as well? He looked really desperate all the way through this. He didn't look comfortable.
I don't think his eyes looked red because he was desperate. I think they looked red because he was smoking weed. I
He
mean,
would probably need to.
I can verify that, but considering the the type of
But
answers we heard, I mean,
true.
surely you need to be a little bit crazy or a little bit high to go in an
Mm,
electoral presidential debate and
yeah.
act like this. I mean, fuck, people in their final exams are more prepped like that
Oh yeah.
than that. And now you have the presidential debate, which is supposed to be the most important thing in the country to become a
Hmm.
president, and they go out and act like this. It's like,
Did you
oh
actually
man.
just a quick one as well? Did you hear when the host actually asked them both, would you recognize Donald Trump as president if he wins, given he's a convicted felon? And they both gave the correct answer of yeah, because the American people would have elected him, and he'll be the president of the United States, convicted felon or not. NATO needs America, and we need America.
I mean,
They gave
that
the right
wasn't a
answer there.
wrong. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a wrong answer,
Yeah,
but
it was a stupid question. And she was just like, yeah, but even if he's a convicted felon, and Starmer just went, it makes no difference if he's elected leader of America or he's elected leader of America. What realistically, what does she want them to do about it? If Donald Trump wins in America, which he may do, what are Britain gonna do? Like realistically, what does she want Britain to do? Invade America and remove him? Do you know what
I
I mean?
mean,
Not
I don't
recognize
know.
him as
Like,
president? That would be
uh,
damaging to the economy.
what do you mean? What they're gonna do? We have officially. Uh, I'm not actually. I'm not sure if it was us, but anyways, there's quite a large number of countries that have officially recognized Palestine as a separate
Mm,
country, and you
yeah.
see the results of that, right, in the war,
Mm. Maybe
which
Penny
were
Mordaunt will nuke. Maybe Penny
none
Mordaunt will nuke
really.
America.
But yeah, jokes aside, I honestly don't know what the point is of asking a question in regards to foreign politics, like straight up American politics,
Mm,
when you have a lot more pressing matters in your own
yeah.
country that need
True.
taken care of. Like Trump being elected as president shouldn't be number one priority when the NHS is an issue, which
Mm,
is your national health.
yep.
When the pensions are fucked,
Yep.
the
I
tax are
mean,
fucked, then
mm,
you have the benefits, you have crime as well. I saw was brought up, especially knife crime.
That was in the BBC debate.
I know it was the BBC one, but in general, what my point is, you shouldn't bother asking questions in regards to foreign politics when you have so many pressing issues that need addressing.
Yep. And we will get to the BBC one as well in the second half. Just because what I was going to just talk about next was what you were talking about before with that woman who was talking about the food, and this was the next plan of Rishi Sunak with because this was the field test to see what they could get away with, what would stick, and the £2,000 thing stuck. So this was just what they thought they could get away with because what Penny Mordaunt stopped talking about in the BBC one was the future. Was saying it's the future, it's the future. She cut that out with the narrative in the BBC one. Sunak though, because you know that woman who asked about cost of living, how she was paying for food. The food had gone up 3 times. She'd lost her savings. She was in debt, and it was tragic. And she said she was saying she was working to live, not live in the sense of enjoying life, but literally living in the sense of its denotational meaning, sustaining her own existence. And this was another strategy of Sunak's. Whenever anything is brought up about living conditions, show fake empathy with the same half smile to pretend like he's trying to get a bond and to try and bond and connect with the person very unsuccessfully, and then throw out the following: I'm on working people's side because furlough, despite the fact he's smashing the benefit system as well, so he's making people poorer. But he would always mention furlough, which was years ago, I think like 2020, 2021. So that was more part of it. But then he would move on to, it was very formulaic. Then he would move on to, we are making things better because we have because he was using national statistical success, like inflation coming slightly down, to try and convince this woman that his plan is working and that she wasn't suffering on the ground. And it's just not a reflection of fucking reality. You can bring inflation down all you want, but if prices don't come down with the inflation, then it doesn't matter. If energy bills don't come down with the inflation, it doesn't matter. And he's saying to her, we'll lower your taxes. Well, any lowering of the taxes he does is still going to be a cut because he's raised taxes so fucking high that a slight decrease is still going to be within the realms of the cut. That's the trick they always use. Raise significantly and then cut slightly to give people the illusion that they've given them a benefit, when in reality they've only given them a fraction of what they've already taken. And Starmer didn't point that out because he himself will be using that technique when he gets in. And he's there telling this woman that everything's working and that there are going to be improvements. It was just farcical. And Starmer was right to blow holes in that. Because did that not annoy you a little bit as well? You've got this woman saying she's basically struggling to survive, and you've got this dipstick basically who's got £700 million in the bank saying, "Don't worry, I did furlough, and inflation's coming down. I can't pay my bills. Inflation's coming down." The whole thing was absurd.
Was I annoyed? Yes. Was I surprised? No, because I
Mm-mm.
mean, just look at them.
Yeah.
It takes one look to realize the time of scam that they are.
Mm.
So yeah, I wasn't surprised hearing him the way he spoke. He's the same person that 2 days ago was laughing at the nurse
Yes, the
asking
GP.
exactly being asked serious
Mm.
question.
We were actually going to cover that, so we'll just cover that now very quickly because it is just a quick point. So what Jim's referring to, he was doing it because again, this is in relation to how he interacts with people. He can't fucking do it, and he's got no empathy for anybody that's beneath him, which is why his public interactions are so bad. He doesn't do well. I don't know how he's going to do it on this at the Sky News thing where he's taking direct Q&A from an audience, unless Beth Rigby acts as the filter and respins the questions. But he was at a rally, sorry, and there was a GP in the audience, and she was basically asking him, why is he making GPs redundant when they could be working? And it was more about the fact that he's getting rid of GPs and replacing them with health assessors. And this Now, this got a response out of someone from the audience saying, maybe if you'd have, I'll try and find the clip and play the clip just so you get the exact one. But long story short, Before he answered with the generic, I have NHS in my blood. My dad was a GP. My mum was a pharmacist. Blah 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 blah. Fake empathy. And then she said yes. She continued on dismantling that. And then some guy in the audience basically just went, "Well, maybe if you'd been in the surgery, you were in the surgery. Sorry, you were on holiday more than you were in the surgery, love." A bit condescending. And Sunak, the audience laughed with him, but Sunak also laughed, and he shouldn't have, because she was talking about underqualified people assessing people with 6 or 7 diseases, or 5 or 6 diseases rather at a time, and that it would require a very high level doctor or or a GP, someone with a high amount of training. Sorry. And he started laughing at that. And when you're talking about 37,000 GPs not voting for the Tories, you're also timesing that by 10 or 20 because of the patients who respect and admire their GPs because of the GPs helping them out. And that was just insane. And this is Sunak's big weakness. He cannot interact with the public. He can't put forward the illusion of empathy very well. He look like he cares, and his judgment calls as well when he's interacting with people. It's beyond belief. I mean, you saw that one as well. I mean, what did you take from it?
Yeah, he's completely out of touch
Yeah.
with the reality in the world, and he just doesn't care. Like, it's not only that he doesn't have empathy, he just doesn't have the perception necessary
Mm.
to
No
deal with these
comprehension.
issues. Exactly. And yeah, his money are secured, so he's happy. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where the story ends. I'm not even sure why he's running. Looking at him, not only I'm not filled with confidence, but I feel like
Mm.
he's just, doing it because he has nothing better to do. He knows
Mm.
he lose. Everyone knows he lose, but he still keeps at it for some reason. So I'm not sure.
Mm.
But
Honestly,
it's really disgusting, especially when on top of that he went ahead, going back to the debate, and stands by his point of introducing military service. But yeah, we're gonna
mm.
talk about that a bit later
Yeah.
because that's also part of the BBC interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the person, sorry, I think the reason, not the person, sorry, the reason why he's still in this, I think he wanted to step down. And the party's basically said to him, if you do that, then you'll take our chances into the minus numbers. You have to run in the election because if we lose you before this election, we'll look utterly futile. There's still talk that he might resign during the election. I can't see it because that really would kill off any chances. Right now, the Tories might win about 100 seats or something like that. If he resigns, that could damage that. Right now, them losing the election is a given. They're thinking damage control to stay in as opposition. That's what they're thinking. That BBC debate highlighted really well that this is about opposition. They want to remain they want to go into being the opposition, and right now they might struggle to do that. So that's why they're not going to. I think it's people saying to Sunak that you're not allowed to resign. Of course, I could be proved wrong. I have no info or contacts in the Tory party, so I might be wrong about that. But that would damage them. I also, as well, something that I thought was very low. Although what I'll say before that, once Starmer made up his mind to talk over the fucking moderator, he did eloquently put down that £2,000 claim and say that it wasn't independent, and I thought that was quite good of him. He should have done that though right at the beginning and snuffed it out and just said lie, 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 even talking over the moderator and Sunak just to get it out there. But he seemed reluctant to do it, and that's on him. I thought it was very bad form when Sunak called Labour a threat to national security. And I thought it was funny how Starmer just put him right in his place, talking about how he himself was involved in anti-terrorism cases as a prosecutor, and that they actually landed 7 planes because there was going to be bombs and everything going off on them. And then he said, as opposed to Sunak, who made all of his money as an investment banker, betting against the pound, and Sunak looked so pissed off and panicked because he didn't know what to do, and Starmer deliberately started talking over him. So when Sunak said, "Well, you were part of this extremist organization," the audience didn't really catch it because Starmer basically talked over him. Now, these aren't good debate manners. I'm fully aware that we've already gone on record and say they were bad at debating. We're just commenting on the exchanges. And I think Starmer did well to just shut Sunak down during that exchange doing that. However, we're talking about all the positives for Starmer. Starmer himself was still all over the place. He didn't really mention any Labour policies. He was more concerned about attacking Sunak. We didn't really hear anything from Starmer, giving the illusion that there's not much difference between him and Sunak. They did look like they were both the same. The only thing that Starmer did really to differentiate himself, like I said, was he was a bit better at destroying Sunak's narratives than Sunak was his. But it's not hard when you're dealing with a Tory. And also, as well, just one last thing before I move on to the negatives. Although this is the start of the negatives, really. Did you notice how there was a question of will you go into austerity? And Starmer just said no. Whether he means it or not, he just said no. Simple as that, no. While Sunak said we will be investing in public services, the reason why he said that instead of yes or no, because austerity is cutting public services, the reason why he said that instead of yes or no is because he will take a lot out of public services and then invest a little bit back in so he can say, well, at least we're investing. See, it's not austerity, we're still investing. That's why he said that. And I think that Starmer knew what answers to give to make Sunak look bad, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it does, because
Mm.
without giving a straight answer on anything, he pretty much has the right, quote unquote, to do whatever they want. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, no matter what anyone says, as soon as they got to power, they also do whatever they want. So yeah.
Yep. Not much left to go now because, like I said, we're not going to cover the full debate. We'll be here for hours if we did. Some of the negatives with Starmer because Sunak did have. I'll give Sunak some good moments here. Sunak did do a couple of exchanges where he won. So, for example, when he was talking about the doctors' strikes, he did get some applause because there wasn't really a lot of applause of this debate. There weren't many videos of it circling around Twitter, to be honest, when they were talking about the NHS strikes. Now, Sunak was just blaming the strikes for all of his failings with the NHS. He was blaming the pandemic. And Starmer did get a hit when he basically said, well, first he says they're going down, despite the fact there's like 0.5, I think, what was it, 0.2 million more increase? How is that going down? He doesn't know his maths. And the audience was just laughing at Sunak. And Sunak, you could see him unsettled. Because the thing about Sunak is he's not used to being mocked and he's not used to being laughed at. And I thought that was quite good, because Starmer seems a bit better at handling being laughed at, probably because he's been laughed at a lot more. And I think that was quite good. But then Sunak did manage to weasel his way out of the doctors' strikes because he basically said, "Look, I don't want to give doctors 35% pay rise because we can't afford it. What I'll have to do to give the doctors the pay rise is have a 35% tax increase, and I don't want to raise people's taxes to pay for that." And he got a thunderous applause from that. Now that's very much a grey area as well because there's a lot of points about this. I think doctors should have a 35.
He could raise taxes, but depends on the areas. So for example,
Well,
if he
it would have to
starts
be the
taxing
rich.
stocks
Mm,
and shit like this,
yeah,
which are untouchable, which is the reason why he paid one of the reasons why he paid 0.4% tax.
yeah. It's why all of his assets are in shares and things. So yeah, if he taxed the rich, he could have, and that's pretty much what Labour was saying. They're gonna do like a non-don tax because he pointed out because while Sunak said, "Oh yeah, well we have a non-don tax," Sunak did point out there was a loophole. But the thing is, that's a good counter to that, Jim. Why didn't Starmer say that?
Why would
Do you get
he?
what I'm? Pardon?
Why would he? I
I
mean,
know.
it's no secret anymore, which we've said earlier, Labour is no longer
Mm,
Labour to begin with.
yeah, that
They're
that was
pretty
where
much Conservatories 2.0.
that was one of the negatives about Starmer. He wasn't great at putting in the final. He wasn't good at stamping on the neck of these arguments. He lacked a lot of bite with his criticisms. I'll give I'll give a couple of more examples. So yeah, like that one for example there. You hit the nail on the head. Why didn't Starmer say that? Because well, he probably isn't going to have a capital gains tax either. So that prevented him from winning that exchange and annihilating the Tories. He doesn't want to commit to anything because we don't know what he's going to do. But he's also a lot like them. But also another one, Sunak kept on saying we'll cut taxes to free up income. We'll cut taxes to free up income. It is right that he has raised taxes to the highest they have been in decades. Starmer did say that, but to make that even more effective, I would have called out the practice of increasing significantly and then deducting insignificantly, to maintain the cut. And secondly, I would have also said, if you're going to have a tax cut, Rishi, how are you going to fund your new national service with bill that will cost 2.4 billion? How will you cut how will you cut getting rid of national insurance? How will you cut all of your new policies that will how will you fund all of your new policies that will cost money? But Starmer didn't say that, and that would have been such a good response.
It
And
would have been, but
mm,
as we have reiterated, we're dealing with two incompetent people
yeah,
with
and there's
zero leadership skills, both of
yeah,
them.
just to avoid being accused of liking Stormy, because I don't like either of them, both men didn't really look like they had a lot of empathy. Between them, Sunak was the worst for looking insincere. He has the same facial expression every time. He tries to emphasize these fake half smile and this, with this fake half smile and a robotic voice. It just immediately puts you off him. But at the same time, Starmer would never answer the questions directly, and he would use these people's misery as a launching point to go into these broad attacks on the Tories without actually addressing any of what they just said. That, in its way, is also a lack of empathy.
Indeed.
And yeah, like the lady who asked about the cost of living, neither Sunak nor Starmer addressed really anything. Starmer said, you're going through this, and I fully recognize that. But he didn't really offer anything to try and improve the situation. It was just, this guy is blah, blah, blah. And like I said, there was no, aside from criticism, there weren't really a lot of policies on offer. Although I did love the fact that Sunak's national service wasn't the main talking point of the debate, and when it was brought up, people just laughed at him. But did you notice how Sunak said while they were laughing at him, he did actually say it'll be good for national security? That
Yeah,
really
yeah, I
tells
picked
me,
up on that. I really picked
yeah,
up on that, yeah.
that tells me immediately that he won because that 30,000 places in the military, that is a NATO requirement of a response force. And these 18-year-olds are going to be on paper, they're going to be the response force to fulfill that requirement. So I just, like I said, but the laughter just, it gave it the attention it deserves, which isn't much. And like I said, both guys just look like they were drilled by the same person on how to speak and had repeated mannerisms. Uh, it just wasn't great. Some other things that I picked up as well. You've got Sunak basically when asked how can you connect. Sama said to Sunak, "How can you connect with people?" And all Sunak does is say, furlough, furlough, furlough. That's all he can do. And the thing is, even at the time when Sunak was giving out the furlough, he didn't chase up any of the fraud. So it was obviously to do favor to his rich friends. And also, he said at the time that taxes would have to be paid back to pay for it. I think at one point he said there would be pain coming in the future, but I can't verify that. That might have been a journalist saying it on his behalf. So this whole furlough made him a nice guy. It didn't, because they all more or less said, we're doing it as a necessity. You're going to have to pay the taxes back. Translation, we're going to use this to increase taxes significantly. So they would just basically throw it back at us and say you have to pay more taxes because of furlough, maybe more than the furlough is worth. So, like I said, Starmer should have highlighted that. But I think maybe Starmer
Yeah.
is gonna blame the Tories' pandemic spending and say we're gonna have to, because this was something the Guardian accused Labour of. They're saying that what's gonna happen is when Labour get in, there's gonna be some kind of emergency budget, and they're gonna say the economy is in such a state. We didn't realise this until we got in. We're gonna have to raise taxes. There's a Guardian article basically accusing them of that.
Yeah, and we can see it happen because I'll
Mm.
tell you what, over the years, nothing becomes cheaper. Nothing.
Yep.
Everything just gradually overall increase in price. So overall,
Mm.
you will need more money to survive.
Mm.
So even though we keep hearing, oh, we're going to cut there, we're going to decrease taxes here and that
Mm.
and whatnot,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you will end up paying more,
Yep.
regardless of
It.
who comes up there, because
Yep.
life just becomes more and more expensive over
Mm.
the years. It's how it is.
Yep. And also, Starmer could have brought up Operation Cygnus, Michelle Moan to dismantle the pandemic narrative. But the other thing as well is, just one last thing about Sunak's ideas. We actually talk about this one. The fact he always said, "I have a plan, and the plan is working." Like every time he would say that, as if he said it enough times, people would believe it. The plan is working. This person can't afford to live. The plan is working.
I mean, really,
Mm,
it seems the case that the plan is working, and if you can afford to live, then that means your role is to be consumed by the system we've
mm,
established in order to support the system. Hence, the plan is working.
yeah. The the other thing I thought was interesting as well is like you saw Sunak panic a couple of times when people were laughing at him, and then he would just have a full meltdown saying Labour will tax your pensions, they'll tax everything, they'll tax, tax, tax. So the only thing he has left is to scare people into voting for the Tories. There was one odd question that was thrown in, and it's been taken out of context by someone by Mayor Tusai, who's, by the way, on GB News and Murdoch Empire Money, so they'll have paid him to say this. I thought it was a weird one, which was if you have a dying relative, would you use private healthcare? Now, Jim, if I was asked that, I would say yes. When my dad passed away, I would have used private healthcare if I had the option. I think most sane people would.
Yep.
Starmer said no, and people have interpreted that as him saying, I want my relative to die. I think more it was just standing by the NHS. Because Starmer had actually said previously that the NHS is in his DNA, because all of his sisters are nurses and things. So I think it was to remain consistent with that.
I know, but at the same time, it felt disingenuous because
Yeah,
really, we all know that everyone would go to private healthcare in a blink of an eye
yeah.
because everyone knows that the NHS is shit at the moment,
Hmm.
and it's very difficult to get anything really out of it.
Yeah. But I don't think he deserves to say that he would want his parent to die. He would want his relative to die. I think it was just a tokenistic virtue signaling gesture. Probably something that he thought of on the spot. I personally would have just been truthful and said, yeah, I'd use private healthcare, because most of the audience would have been thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I know the audience was selected independently. What I noticed was whenever Sunak said something sensible, he did get applause. But to be honest, there wasn't a lot of applause all the way through that debate. I don't think the in-studio audience was that taken with either candidate. What did you think?
In regards to what?
I don't think the audience was taken with either candidate. Like
No,
there was,
no. From my perspective, is the audience was in generally fed up with both of them,
mm,
and the
yeah.
only reason there was clapping probably is because there could be a clapping side on top, like saying "clap now" or "don't clap now."
Mhm. Uh, one thing I just want to say as well. Today is when the manifestos are out. Don't worry, Jim. We can't cover them because they've come out today, and we had this recording to do, so we can't cover them. We'll be covering them next week. But in these debates, right? Watch out for the slogans and the sound bites the politicians had, both in this one and the BBC one, just to the audience, right? Because I guarantee you are going to see some of those sound bites on the manifesto covers. We now go into the BBC debate. Unless, Jim, you've got anything you want to say about the ITV one?
No.
Okay. The Liberal Democrat candidate, Daisy Cooper, said fair deal. I can't remember what the exact statement was, but fair deal is on the cover of the Liberal Democrat manifesto. So a lot of these debates were basically used just to get sound bites of the manifesto slogans for their pledges and their policies. So even the politicians, we've already said this, but I don't think the politicians have any intention of going on there and answering questions, or at least some of them. They're just getting their sound bites in clips that will be played on social media. But back to the debates. I just want to say one thing as well. Apparently, people were saying that it was a London audience and they will be naturally left wing and inclined to go for the left wing parties. The BBC claimed it was an independent pollster that selected them from all over the UK. I've got no idea what's true and what's not. All I know is that it was about something like 18 minutes into the debate before there was any applause. So again, you didn't really see. And Nigel Farage got a fair amount of applause, as well as the left wing parties. Nigel Farage, it was slow at first, but he did get some applause. So the audience, it did look like there was a bit of everything in that audience. He said naively. Either that or people just were not that impressed by the candidates and they were going off what some of them were saying. Because I would think, with the exception of Penny Mordaunt, pretty much most of the politicians there had their moment of saying something quite sensible. But I actually, just to start off, Jim, you know, this debate was kind of similar. As you were saying before, the candidates in this debate, with the exception of Farage, actually, who did answer quite a few questions directly, they They didn't really answer the questions, did they?
Nope.
There's one person I just want to talk about first, and that was Penny Mordaunt. Firstly, this debate was always going to be stacked against her. She was the Tory one. This was always going to be stacked against her, not because of how limited she is intellectually, but the fact that she has to represent and address the Tory campaign so far. For me, she was the right choice for the following reason. You won't get decent analysis or even creative responses from her, but what you will get is someone who can shout over people and regurgitate lines and slogans in a convincing way with a moderate success rate of being able to do so without being talked over. She's a loudmouth, an articulate loudmouth. The fact she was sent tells you immediately that at least the Tory party didn't have any intention of interacting with the audience. And we now go into what we were talking about, because her opening line was having to apologise for the D-Day fiasco, in which Rishi Sunak left the D-Day celebration event, the D-Day memorial event, rather. So I was, celebration of its success. The D-Day memorial event, because tragically so many people died. He left that early and left David Cameron there. And I think this is the moment where people just cemented a lot of the elderly voters who he was trying to win over with this national service. They've just decided, yeah, I'm not voting Tory because of this. I mean, what was he thinking, Jin?
No idea.
You know what's even worse about it?
What?
The fact that he deliberately left early because he arranged to have an ITV interview at that time.
That's just insane.
How vain do you have to be? You don't leave events like that during an election. It's being compared to Gordon Brown when he called an old lady bigoted. She was basically asking him questions about. She did make reference to you've got all these immigrants flocking over here, and then when he was that was her wording, by the way, and he was trying to answer it, and then when she then went on to my son's become he's become a big psychologist or something, and he has to pay back his student loans. And Brown was like, well, we do expect the people who are successful to pay back their loans. And Sky News left the mic on him, and when he went into his car, he got caught saying some bigoted woman, and it was blown out of proportion. Now, if I was him, I would have doubled down and said, look, if someone's going to come to me and say flocking over here, I am going to call them bigoted. And Sky News tried to badmouth, to kind of give them a negative image because they were pro-Cameron, but even people were saying, well, she was a little bit bigoted, to be honest. But with the majority of the audience, the majority of the voter base, they decided at that point that they just didn't like Gordon Brown. And a lot of people are saying that this D-Day moment, because the media just aren't letting it go. There's been worse things than this, I'm not going to lie, like that MP who's been caught taking pictures of children at parties who's had to stand down. That's not being talked about, really. Or Penny Mordaunt's brother, who basically got done for sex offences. That's not being talked about, but this is. They're saying this is the thing that's going to get him done. And this is the thing that's going to really turn voters against them. And when they go to the ballot box, make them decide, yeah, I don't want to vote for this guy. What do you think? So yeah, I was just talking about how Penny Mordaunt had to basically apologize for the D-Day debacle with Rishi Sunak, and she was at a disadvantage because she had to start off apologizing for that, which is never a good start. But obviously, as well, we've learned that he ducked out of that early to go to an ITV interview, and the ITV interview has since been released. And he basically committed one PR error to go make another. He would have been better off staying because obviously this is the one where he said that he didn't have Sky News TV, which he tried to pass off as him not being very well off as a child, despite the fact his dad was a GP and his mother was a pharmacist. What's your take on that?
Yeah, like no matter how you see it, it's it's ridiculous. I honestly don't know if I should laugh or cry because this situation is so ridiculous. But at the same time, you realize, okay, this person wants to run. Actually, not he is running his own electoral campaign and aims to become, prime minister or have at least a seat in the parliament. And you're like, okay, so basically we're fucked because if everyone thinks like this and have that same attitude, which to a degree I think they do, then yeah, who the fuck put them there,
Mm.
and what can we do to take them out?
It wasn't
because
even a.
there is,
Oh,
yeah, this is just one small thing out of many that made a lot of people quite angry and disappointed in general and have
mm,
no faith whatsoever. I'm going to go back to the European elections again that happened. There was a big amount of people who didn't vote, I think 60% across the whole of Europe,
mm,
which a lot of people who would interpret as a lack of interest, but it's also the case that they know that no matter what they vote, the result is going to be the same. So I think that's a general sort of, I don't know, indication that something is just very wrong.
yeah.
Because if you're part of the society where it is your duty and your privilege to voice your opinion with your vote, to elect your leaders, which is going to shape the place that you live in, it also going to change and shape the quality of life you're having to a big degree. And if you can't even be asked to vote, then it's not because of lack of interest, but because no matter the results, it's going to be the same. That's like a very huge symptom of a degrading society, I think. Sorry, I went in a bit of a tangent,
So,
but I think that you see all these ridiculous things that happen that people who run for the presidency do, and they're
mm,
ridiculous. But I think it's a symptom of a bigger issue here,
yeah.
which has bigger consequences because regardless of what Sunak comes to power, or Stama, if I pronounce his
Mm,
name correctly,
yeah.
at the end of the day, we are the ones that are getting fucked in the ass. Because
Yeah.
I guarantee you, everyone is bitching about, me included, that Sunak paid 0.4% tax. But Stama, I wouldn't be surprised
Mm,
if he did the same.
mm. Well, as well, just because something that's quite relevant to that, I was just going to add in as well the whole Rishi Sunak Sky TV thing. I mean, a lot of us didn't have Sky TV as children because it was a luxury product at the time. It was nowhere near as common as it is now. So, you know,
Yes. But at the same
so that's.
time, you wouldn't
Mm,
say that being a big sacrifice.
mm,
You know, a big sacrifice could be not having a meal, not
yeah.
having a roof overhead, especially in the living crisis, in the cost of living crisis we have today. We're talking about sacrifices as a kid. You mean that sort of shit. But the fact that he thinks that not having Sky TV was a big sacrifice says a
Mm,
lot about what he thinks in terms of austerity,
yeah.
what he thinks about us, how much he undervalues our intelligence,
Mm,
or he's just plain stupid. Maybe both. I don't know. But it seems like he lives in his own bubble. If he said
he does.
this in a serious note, he lives in a completely different world than us, in his
Mm,
own bubble, and there is no way whatsoever that he can relate to anything common people go through.
I mean, just actually on that as well, with what you were saying, 'cause, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And what you said before as well about Starmer being the same as Sunak, just to take it back to the debate, Penny Mordaunt made reference to something, and I think there might be something to it. Believe it or not, a Tory actually referenced The Guardian. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to this in terms of a factual basis, but it wouldn't surprise me. Apparently, what the rumors are about Labour is when they get in power, oh gosh, we didn't realize how bad the economy was. And under that guise, they're going to do an emergency budget. And with it, they will do a lot of they'll raise taxes and do a few cuts as well under the pretense of an emergency budget to a surprise an immediate reaction to how bad the economy is, which they would have just found out about. So Penny Mordaunt did link that, and like I said, them being similar, it sounds like something but identical to what the Tories would do if they commit to do it. So there's already rumours circulating that Starmer is going to do some similar things to the Tories. And on that as well, at times Mordaunt and Rayner just argued about trivial things, and they didn't, Rayner being the Labour representative, the deputy leader, it just seemed like there wasn't much different about it, different between them. In fact, the SNP candidate, the House of Commons leader, I believe it was, said that you couldn't even fit a cigarette paper between them because they're that close to each other, which I thought was a very good line. And Nigel Farage did nothing but point that out as well, that Labour and the Tories weren't that different,
Yeah,
if that makes
and
sense.
it does make sense. It's something we talked about earlier. Like, we have two opposing factions, Labour and the Conservatives, which represent different things and have different values. But that used to be the case. Now it's not the case anymore
Mm.
because, yeah, people realize this as well, and they have no faith. I mean, considering how much Labour has fucked up, sorry, how much conservatories have fucked up,
Mm.
it should be dead easy for Labour to get ahead in the election
Yeah.
and even be elected. But even as an opposition, they couldn't get the shit together.
Mm.
So, what sort of confidence can they inspire if they couldn't do their job, if Labour couldn't do their job properly as an
Mm.
opposition?
That
How
is.
could I be confident that they're going to do their job all
Mm.
right? The, even at the competent level, barely competent level, if they get elected. Because I personally don't see that's possible for them.
Mm. Yeah, I think that.
And you have a situation where Tories is going to fuck you over, so you can vote Tories.
Mm.
You have Labour being incompetent, almost as incompetent as the Tories, but
Mm.
from a different angle.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is shit, I can't vote. This is shit, I can't vote. So you're gonna have to, look at other options. But at the same time, because the way the my understanding is that the way the elections work here are based on the majority. No matter
Mm.
what I vote, if the majority votes something else, my vote has no power.
Mm.
If I understand how things work, so yeah, it's not an easy thing to
Mm. Party with the
you
most
know
seats.
to bring change. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Because yes, I could bite the bullet and go, okay, I'll vote Labour. At least my vote won't go to waste. But I don't feel like voting Labour. I don't feel like voting Tories either. And this is the dilemma, and not a dilemma, but a dead end that a lot of people feel, at least here in the UK. Like, it reached the point where neither faction represents hope for the future,
Mm.
at least to a competent level. I'm talking about like the very bare minimum competence that you would expect
Yeah.
from someone being elected as a prime minister, and they cannot even meet that. And
Mm.
this is scary.
Yeah. No, I think that's a
I
very good
don't
point.
remember. Like again, I haven't been following the British politics as close. It's only recently that I started following them. But
Mm.
my understanding is, from looking at this, these are the most incompetent candidates that we've ever had so far. I think in Britain, based on what I see and what I hear from different discussions that I hold with different people having different opinions. And I mean, look at the debates, like they emit pure incompetence.
Mm. Yeah. And just to re-emphasize, that incompetence, just to move into a different segment as well. Just sticking with Penny Mordaunt, because we've got a few things to say about her because she's part of the incumbent government. One big act of incompetence I thought on her part, aside from the fact she looked angry all the way through, like she was ready to scream at people, and the way she was pointing a finger at Rayner, like you literally had. I loved how you had all the opposition parties on one side of the room, and then you had Labour, who was, they're the favourite to win, and you had the Tories, who are the favourite to go out. And they'll be lucky if they even are in opposition next term. You had them in the corner on their own, and they were just kind of squabbling to the point where the, the Green Party leader went, "Well, that was dignified, wasn't it?" and got a laugh. But aside from that, sorry, it was just the fact that how angry Penny Mordaunt looked. She would look ready to shout over people. But in addition, where that didn't work was some of the things she was saying. Like, she crossed a lot of lines saying things like Putin will invade if you vote Labour, or if he doesn't believe we are willing to use nuclear warheads, he will invade if you vote Labour. She said that. The question that she was responding to there was someone asking about buildup of conventional military forces, not nuclear weapons. When you're discussing, Penny Mordaunt started bringing up the nuclear deterrent every time she wanted to scare the audience into backing her. She would do it again when Angela Rayner rightfully pointed out that she didn't have a leg to stand on talking about a strong economy because she backed Liz Truss's, mini budget, which tanked the economy. And again, she just said, "Well, you did not believe in the nuclear deterrent like Liz Truss did," or something like that. She would always go back to the nuclear deterrent. And Rayner and Lammy, I don't know why they didn't vote for it, mind. It's always asking for trouble politically when you say that, because most people are for the nuclear deterrent because everyone else has a nuclear deterrent in most of the countries. But sorry, I've gone on a bit here. The baseline point is she came off as terrifying talking because she basically said to Rayner, it's not just being pro-nuclear deterrent, you have to be seen to be willing to use it. Translation, you have to be seen as crazy enough to use it. If she got in power and was the prime minister, she could turn us into the fucking North Korea of Europe with that kind of attitude. When you talk about nuclear warheads, there's a line you don't cross. You say that you need the nuclear deterrent because other countries have nuclear weapons, but you don't talk about willingness to use them because they're a deterrent. You don't want to have to use them, if that makes sense. And I think she will have scared a lot of people. She looked fucking unhinged. The penny flipped on that one. Really. Pun definitely intended. She just looked unhinged. I mean, she was basically a wrecking ball. Anything she expressed wasn't done with grace or delicacy. She was just a fucking wrecking ball with the way that she would try and terrify everybody. Did you pick up on that with the nuclear deterrent? How she just fixated on it?
Yeah, and I don't know if she was on something, but I got some major Kim vibes. So that goes back to what you said about her acting like as crazy as a North Korean, or putting us on the same level as North Korea. I don't understand. I really don't understand. From the one hand, they're on about like, oh yeah, let them in. We support migration, and on the other hand, oh, we're gonna nuke the fucking bastards. Like, choose your fucking mind, one or the other.
Yeah.
Secondly, getting people scared to vote here. I mean,
Mm,
when I'm in a group of people and someone is, being obnoxious, like, oh, you should do this, otherwise, hell will break loose, and
mm,
nuclear deterrence and all that. If someone is aggressive in the group of people, I hang out with, I'm like, all right, no, fuck this, you're out, I don't care.
yeah.
So in this case, I think, hopefully, if the people are a little bit reasonable,
Mm,
they won't vote her at all, and she won't have a seat in the parliament. Because yeah, the last thing we need is the other countries around us to feel threatened by the UK about a nuclear deterrent and act upon it because some lunatic woke up the wrong way in the bed one day. But like, you cannot. Yeah, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. I'm not sure what the point was to emphasize on the nuclear deterrent.
mm. It
I,
was the
I
only thing they
understand.
had on Labour.
Yes, but it shouldn't.
Yeah, no.
It really shouldn't. Like, you've spent so many years in the opposition, and the best thing you can come up for your
Mm,
campaign is a nuclear deterrent. What? At the same time, you're advocating for Russia against Ukraine and Europe
mm,
about the threat of using nuclear, and
mm,
you're also advocating Israel about doing war crimes. I mean, what the fuck do you think will happen if you know,
mhm.
fire up a nuclear missile to a country? Just five bad guys dead and then rainbows and butterflies? The
Yeah,
amount of destruction this weapon can cause. I mean, you need four of them to destroy the whole fucking earth.
yeah. And this was the problem Hillary Clinton had in the debates with Donald Trump. Like I wasn't a fan of either two, and Hillary Clinton would beat him in about 50% of the debate with just better domestic policies. Where she would fall apart, she would never shut the fuck up about war with Russia. And Putin would start saying, sorry, and Trump, not Putin, sorry, Trump would say, talk to Putin and make peace, not war. And that's what tipped people on to Trump in these debates. She looked like a warmongering fool. And that's how Penny Mordaunt came across. I think what happened to Tory HQ was certain things in the ITV debate with Sunak didn't work, like the focus on the future, not the past type thing. Because she didn't go into that, and I think they thought, what else can we try as a simple slogan or a simple accusation to win people over to the Tories? And like I said, I think the nuclear deterrent was just something new for them to try. And I don't really think it's worked, mainly because, well, like I said, she came across as just too unhinged when she was talking about it. The other thing as well was she tried using the £2,094 tax, but that didn't work either. If you remember, I don't know if you saw, the host just debunked it almost immediately when she brought it up. So the BBC host was ready to debunk that one, which I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
was really satisfying.
Well, it is because at least that's what I like a bit more in
Mm,
the debates here is the fact that the journalists actually do a little bit of journalism because in
Oh,
Greece all the questions are prepared and pre-answered, pre-worked, and there's like you're basically hearing people recite stuff, and the journalists are, you know, scared to even ask proper questions.
mm, yeah, I absolutely agree. Moving on to the actual Green Party candidate, one thing I thought, because she answered the question as well, and she had a really weird one. I don't know if you saw it, where she basically stalled and babbled and ended up with the military could be used to stop climate change. I'm not really sure how the army can fight climate change. They can certainly conduct rescue operations and disaster relief, helping with some of the symptoms. But aside from that, I don't know what she wants the army or the military in general to do about fucking climate change. Aside
Yeah, I
from
mean,
reducing CO2s.
no, I mean plastic tanks because that
Mm,
way you eliminate. Oh, sorry, not plastic. I mean paper tanks because that way you eliminate the amount of plastic and metal you use, which are very very damaging. Also, swap the diesel engines to an electronic battery ones. And I mean,
mm,
if the tank stops midway through because it runs out of power, at least you know that this tank there, although immovable, it won't be, a contagious or a problem for the environment.
mm,
I don't know, green powered shells, maybe? Yeah, swap gunpowder with, I don't know, the green version of that. Like, fuck.
mm,
Honestly, it's like they're trying to find solutions on problems that they don't exist, on areas that they shouldn't exist. Like, yeah,
mm,
it's it has left me with no words to say. Really, I'm speechless.
mm,
I don't know. Like, from the one hand, you want a proper defense able to respond to the threats that happen around you, especially with Russia and Ukraine. Although, to be fair, I find it highly unlikely Russia to even look at us the wrong way. Anyways, or Israel. But anyhow, you live in your hold as part of your campaign. You say, okay, we need to have a proper defense system, and then you're on about saying, oh, but don't forget to make it environment friendly because yeah, when you fire up that nuke, you the first thing that you care about is how environmental friendly that nuke is gonna be, even though it's gonna destroy anything in a radius of like God knows how many 100 kilometers. I
mm,
mean, even in Chernobyl, which wasn't a fucking nuke, it was a
yeah.
reactor, not an actual nuke. Chernobyl, there are certain areas that are still deemed dangerous even today.
Yeah. It's why
And
YouTubers have to sneak in.
exactly, and this was a factory, a reactor. It wasn't a
Mm.
bomb. And you're talking about a bomb. And at the same time, you're also advocating stuff for the environment. Like, what the fuck are you smoking?
I mean, the
To
Tories
be
have
able
already.
to. Yeah,
I mean, the
sorry, go
Tories
on.
have. No, it's fine. The Tories have always been a bit loose with their nukes in terms of posturing. I mean, I think Penny Mordaunt was trying to appeal to her own constituency rather than the country, to be honest, because she's predicted to lose her seat by something like 5%, Labour swing or something like that. And David Cameron was a bit loose with the nukes as well when there was tension over the Falklands with Argentina, or tension over the Falklands with Argentina again. I can't remember what year exactly it was, but it was during Cameron's premiership. He sent two nuclear subs off the coast of the Falklands, and Barack Obama responded by training Argentine special forces, teaching them how to dismantle nuclear subs, British nuclear subs, because the Americans know quite a bit about British nuclear subs because they've submitted American officers to do the training programs and things. Because if the UK was stupid enough to launch a nuclear weapon into the Falklands, the fallout would go into the US along with other surrounding nations. So it was or if they were willing to fire a nuke into Argentina. I'm not sure what the threat was there, but it was a moronic decision to put nuclear subs. And the reason why Cameron did that is because the military levels that the UK had were shambolic, and they couldn't really muster a military response. So it was more out of laziness, to be honest. I said, when I say fast and loose, I don't mean crazy in relation to David Cameron. I think it was more just laziness. It was just throw a couple of nukes there, throw a couple of nuclear subs there. But it was a stupid decision. And Penny Mordaunt, in terms of why I call her a bit unhinged, she's notorious for having a reputation for not knowing what the fuck she's talking about half the time. She really is. She's notorious for not remembering details, not being able to understand concepts or understand what's going on. She's notorious basically for, and I'm sure it was Lord Frost who actually said he had to fire her because she couldn't do her job. She's literally only where she is because she's a loudmouth and she can talk over people and she's very articulate. But she kind of comes across as very one-dimensional. Someone who I didn't think was one-dimensional though was the Welsh candidate. I'm going to butcher this name, Run ap Lawreth. One thing I thought was funny was when he described the PM's national service policy as the back of a fag packet policy, a fag being a cigarette. But I thought that was I thought that was a pretty good tagline, to be honest. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't particularly remember exactly what he said, to be honest,
Mm,
because well, the rest of the shit Labour and Tories said kind of
mm.
shocked me.
Yeah.
So I don't remember particularly what he said specifically.
Well, he also made a very good point, saying that he felt there was a lack of change from Labour, and every time Rayner blamed the Tories for crashing the economy, it got applause. It got applause, but he got applause for saying that. Like Labour can go after the past, but they don't seem to offer any change. But he articulated it perfectly, and I thought he was quite good the way he challenged Farage on immigration. But we'll go into Farage now. Actually, I just want to go into one more thing before we go to Farage, because we can talk quite a bit on Nigel Farage in there. One thing the SNP leader said, or the SNP Commons leader said, and this was said also in the ITV debate, and I think this was essential. We'll hear this said a lot more. The conspiracy of silence, and he did go into the privatization of the NHS, but he specifically went into the conspiracy of silence between Labour and the Conservatives. Now, this is in reference to, I think it's an IFS report, saying that both the Tories and Labour are going to have to commit to some harsh austerity policies because of the nature of the economy. And they're deliberately not talking about it and not having a go at each other for it because they're both going to have to do it. And when Angela Rayner was confronted on that, she kind of talked past it. She didn't address it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, even on the first debate between Sunak and Starmer, whenever questions were being thrown in regards to tax cuts and austerity,
mm,
the answer was for either one of them to blame the other party about shit they did, but avoiding to answer the question altogether,
mm.
which says a lot.
Yeah, it really does. Just moving on as well, one little thing that I've just got on my notes here. One thing that I'm really getting sick of is Labour talking about we need more homes insulated. We need more homes insulated. Most homes in Britain are insulated, and the ones that aren't have been assessed as not being able to be insulated. And you can get secondary opinions. I think there has to be so much clearance between the walls to get the insulation in or something like that. But there's also a scheme, because I had this done. There's also a scheme that you can get for free to get your homes insulated currently under the Tories.
Yeah, but insulation is a process that in some houses, especially the old ones,
Mm,
required to rebuild a house from scratch
yeah.
the, in order to do it. And
Mm,
sometimes it would mean that you would have to, it might be cheaper and easier to just bring the house down and rebuild it
yeah.
rather than insulating every wall. Because, yeah,
Yeah.
the amount of time and effort it would take to insulate an old house would be a lot more, and the cost as well, than, bringing it down and rebuilding it again.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that backs up, what I said as well. It just doesn't make sense because the only houses that aren't really insulated are the ones that are assessed as not being able to be insulated. So it's kind of a dead policy because there's already something in place to take care of it. All Labour has to do is say, "Hey, this is ours," when in reality it's been there all along. They don't have to change anything. So I don't know why they keep on putting that one out because it's been debunked loads of times. Also, lastly, just before we get to Farage as well, something has to be said for the Liberal Democrat. All she did was Daisy Cooper. All she did was come across as a Sunak clone, and it seemed at times like she was talking to an audience that wasn't there. And she really went for sound bites for social media or a speech where there would be no audience response. The fair deal comments she made, because she said fair deal quite a lot, that's on the cover of their manifesto. So she was basically putting out slogans that would be used in the future. So I mean, she had a couple of good points. Like when they were all putting the boot into Penny Mordaunt over the DJ thing, she told a very graphic story about about a family member's experience in World War II, and that really shamed Mordaunt. But beyond that, I mean, there was also one embarrassing moment where she had to talk about, not breaking pledges when they broke the ultimate pledge of not going after PR so their party could basically get David Cameron in effectively. So, she didn't really and the audience just laughed at her. So I don't think she really did anything. She did very well there, but the Liberal Democrats are taking a very casual approach to this election, to say the least, going on like fair rides and stuff. So I don't know what their game is. I think they'll get more seats definitely, because obviously people forget. Now we get on to Farage. This is where Farage wanted to be. When Farage didn't go back to the US and he said, I'm going to become a candidate for reform. This is what he wanted. This is why he did it, so he could get in these debates. I think so he could get in a position where he was having a go at the mainstream politicians, and quite a few of the opposition parties, including Farage, threw things at the main two, that made them very uncomfortable. Like, for example, I mean, we'll get to a lot about Farage. I mean, the first one, when he was talking about how immigration increased under Blair, and then continued with Cameron, and then continued with the Tories, and he said both Labour and the Tories are guilty of it. That is actually true, and he knows what to say to win his audience over. And the Tories and Labour didn't really have a response for it. Did you notice that?
Oh, I did pick up on it. I think from all the different people I heard on that debate, Farage was the most prepared one. He
Mm.
was very articulate. He was very precise in his answers, and
He did dodge
I
a lot of
would,
questions. He did dodge a few times, though.
yeah, he did dodge a few times, but the ones he did answer, he sounded more reasonable than the
Yeah.
other two. And I hate
Oh
myself for
yeah,
saying this because I'm not fan of Farage, but yeah,
he
the
was.
lesser
He was.
evil.
Mm,
When they say it's like this, he was a lot more articulate, and his answers made a lot more sense compared to what we heard from the rest of the lot.
he was. Yeah, I agree. He was better in some ways. I mean, he was spot on with knife crime. He knew exactly what to say. Stop and search. Stop and search.
Yes,
Stop and search. And
yes, exactly. And
and
he
he.
pretty much said it. Like they knew, they had the stats to see which
Yeah.
areas have the highest knife crime, and they
Yep.
should stop being effectively what he meant is stop being afraid following the wokeness rules in order to, allow criminals walk away just because of color of their skin,
Mm,
which we've seen like in Germany as well when that stabbing happened. And I'm not sure if you've seen the clip, but the officer was reluctant to react because of it.
mm, yeah.
But in any case, there's been a lot of stigma into against police officers who try to carry out their job.
Oh yeah. I saw an LBC radio show where the guy, I think it was Ollie from Politics Joe, was on, and this guy basically said that some of the knife crime areas do have a certain skin color in them, and he just the mere mentioning of that just made the guy the Politics Joe host just say, "You're racist. I'm not talking to you. I don't talk to racists." It's like, debunk him then. Have a discussion. Debunk him. Don't just call him racist
Yeah,
and
but
shut it down.
stats and maths don't lie. And at the
That's
end of the
also true.
day,
Yeah.
we're living in a country where if you're being attacked by someone, the law is kind of against you. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot proactively protect yourself when you're being attacked because if you do so, you might get in trouble because that's how the law works. Like in self defense, if I stab someone as part of self defense, I'd be in trouble. If I were to break someone's hand in self defense, I would be in
Mm,
trouble. And I'm pretty sure, like, the police suggest if someone attacks you, it's better to just run,
yeah.
like just to make sure that you're not in trouble. And we see this even in America, where
Yeah.
carrying a gun is a lot more common and stuff. There's
Mm,
been a case of robbery. Someone tried to steal from a pizza delivery guy. The pizza delivery guy was carrying a weapon, and he defended himself. And the victim's family was like, why was the pizza delivery guy carrying a weapon? They disregard the fact that their son was a criminal stealing, and all they had to ask is why was the victim carrying a weapon?
mm,
Like, isn't that entitlement?
yeah.
Now,
I.
America and Britain, two different countries,
Mm,
but we see the same attitude coming here as well.
mm-hmm. I
At least
think
that's what I feel.
no, absolutely. I think one thing Farage really hit on as well, because he knew what to say. He used the example of Giuliani's New York, Mayor Giuliani, when he was mayor of New York. He had a zero tolerance on crime, and it was very effective. And it was start with the street crime, and eventually you'll get the higher up crime. And Farage was right to point that out. He also talked about how we've more or less legalized shoplifting up to a certain point. One thing I thought was interesting was how the Green Party candidate responded, And she said something very valid, which was you have to bring equality up in the poverty-stricken areas where this is. Now, this is the thing. Farage is talking about tackling the crime caused by the poverty. She's talking about fixing the poverty to remove the necessity for crime. She has the long-term solution. Farage has the short-term solution, and you can use both
Except that
to
she
prevent knife
doesn't,
crime.
because you say that, but at the same time, she was also a big advocate of immigration solving our economy
Yeah,
and letting them all in,
that's
which
what I was going to say.
yeah, which is like you cannot rule out immigration
Mm,
as a cause of knife crime, whether you like it or not. I'm not
mm,
talking about you specifically,
mm,
but anyone who may listen to this. Immigration, especially uncontrolled immigration, and specifically even illegal immigration, especially
mm,
illegal immigration, contributes to the rise of crime.
yeah. I was just going to say as well, yeah, because I fully agree. And the immigration stances did undermine that point, but that was how it escalated to Nigel Farage, countering, saying, "Oh, so you wouldn't do the stop and search then?" Because if you can't do anything about the immigrants coming over doing knife crime, stop and search stops them. It's a good thing to have. And she just went, "Well, is that not the point? Is that not the point? We're supposed to help them. Is that not the point?" She was so against Nigel Farage's solution, which makes sense that she had to basically say that he was wrong, effectively, with obnoxiously saying, "Is that not the point?" Bearing in mind the Green Party put themselves in very questionable status with some of the candidates that they put forward during the local elections, and some of the reactions that those said candidates had when they won. So it wasn't all, but it was certainly a few. But one thing as well, that when knife crime came up, Penny Mordaunt tried to try it on, saying, "Oh well, it's mainly in the Labour areas where knife crime is." That's because Labour probably represents more poor areas than the Tories. And I think the Welsh candidate was correct to point that. No, he didn't point out specifically Labour, but he said it's in the poorer areas, and the Tories have helped make a lot of areas in this country extremely poor.
Also, Labour being more left, they're more woke, and
Mm,
they have an attitude of let them in. Hence,
mm,
they became more tolerant to these behaviors just out of
yeah,
fear of them being racist. See,
yeah.
everyone is happy to let everyone in, but as soon as they come to their neighborhood, it's a problem.
hmm Yeah, and I think as well, yeah, like I said, just yeah, I completely agree because then obviously we only have so much time on the show, and the knife crime segment was very revealing with how the politicians actually, to put it bluntly, Nigel Farage looked like the only one who's actually given it thought and had any awareness of how bad the situation is, because he also mentioned drug gangs, and no one talked about that on the show either. So Farage did come across there as knowing more about street level crime than the others. He looks more in touch with the ordinary person than the others do, if that makes sense. And he's very good at convincing people of that.
He looks more in touch with reality in general.
Yeah, with the exception of Brexit. When he starts talking about Brexit and what a success has been and how it's the fault of the Tories that it's been a disaster and not for him. And I think the SNP leader was right. He is a snake oil salesman who sold a disaster and then stepped away saying, "Oh, it was the Tories' fault." That's where he does fall apart. And you could tell as well that when Brexit was mentioned, did you notice how he didn't fight that? He just stayed silent, hoping the topic would move on because he didn't want to talk about Brexit for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
which
he
is, I
wanted.
think, worked in favor of him because everyone is still sore about Brexit. I'm still sore about Brexit. It's one of the reasons why I hate him.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, I fully agree. I'm annoyed as fuck with him about Brexit. Everyone said it would be a disaster. He did it for himself. He absolutely did it for himself to get himself notoriety, and he probably stood to make a lot of money out of it as well. I would actually like to know how much money he did make out of that, to be honest. But one thing I thought was really interesting as well is, the Tories have the idea of saying, "Oh well, if the fact is going green will cost money. It will cost money to upgrade your house to having the energy pumps. It will all cost money unless there are grants available to do it, and that is what is scaring people." We had Joe Biden basically say to the American population, "Well, just buy an electric car." No one can afford electric cars right now in the cost of living
And fun
crisis.
fact, the battery of the electric car has a
Mm,
specific amount of lifetime. I think it's like 10 years. And if you were to change the battery alone of that car, it's more expensive than the whole car itself. I'm not sure if this changed now, because that was the case maybe 4 years ago, and maybe they brought new models or
Mm.
better technologies, but that was the case 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And there is a, pardon me, a famous video of someone who bought a Tesla.
Mm.
His battery ran out, and in order to swap it, he would have to pay more than the Tesla itself. So pretty much, he made a TikTok video where he set his Tesla on fire and got millions because of the traction that video, had earned.
That's insane.
So yeah,
Mm.
electric works, but there's also that to account.
Mm. I think as well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I thought what was really good though was Penny Mordaunt tried it on saying Labour will do this, and then you had Farage call out the Tories for doing that. I mean, did you hear when she was talking and he went, "Was that the question? Was that the question?" And the host was like, "No, let us speak." It's like, no, hold on, host, he's right. Was that the actual fucking question? She's not answering it. And then he started saying subsidies, 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 and he was like, they couldn't handle him. The only people that could handle him were the other opposition parties who. And the reason why they could handle them, so if anyone who's pro-reform doesn't do this, the reason why they could handle him and put forward stuff for their own audience to listen to is because they had counter arguments, whether right or wrong, whether Farage was right or wrong, whether they were right or wrong. They had counter arguments to the point where they could actually try and shoot him down and he could shoot them down. They had stuff they were offering on the table. The Tories and Labour didn't have that. All they were doing was having a go at each other, and the Tories were trying to make it look like, oh, well, we have all these past successes. So when Farage would have a go at them, they couldn't stand up to him because they had nothing to offer. I mean, what was even worse was Penny, just another example of that, when Penny Mordaunt was having a go at this nationalised energy company that Angela Rayner wants to bring in. And just to be objective here, Penny Mordaunt did have one good thing to say about this, and I fully agree with her. How are you going to get investment into this? Just a rhetorical question here. She said, how are you going to get investment into your new nationalized energy company when you're not going to expand on the energy industry that it's going to be involved with? That is a valid question. Who is going to want to invest in that if it's not going to expand on that? Because people will only invest if they're going to make money. That's why people invest in companies for the return. But just before we get that response, she then followed it up with a not so smart remark, which was, "Do you even have the supply chains? Because we were going to build them." And which Rayner just said, "Well, you've had 14 years. Why didn't you build them before?" And that's where the Tories always fell down. Why didn't you do this before? But neither Rayner looked stronger than Mordaunt, but neither Rayner nor Mordaunt looked particularly strong in this because you could see just a lot of what they were saying was just full of holes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. One thing that came up as well was benefits. Farage went straight after the unemployed. That was a given, really, given who his intended voter base is. Yeah, we say the working class, basically people in poor areas who work. So that's basically his voter base. I would actually like to investigate his new constituency and see what the poverty levels are in that one as well, just to see if that's doing it. But one thing Farage was spot on about Mind, and I don't think he's worked this out himself. I think he's heard it from somewhere because I've heard this from somewhere, but I can't remember where. He pointed out the tax rate, the 40 pence tax rate that used to be for the very rich. And now it's being lowered down to the middle classes, and I think that's true. I think that's a good thing to actually reveal there. And Penny Mordaunt didn't like that being revealed, if that makes sense.
It sort of does. I'm just not aware exactly what the 40 pence tax is.
40 pence of the pound. So
Which,
every pound you earn, you pay 40 pence on.
okay, and this was only for the rich, and now it's for the middle class as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Basically, a lot of people in the audience looked a bit scared to applaud Farage, but he did get quite a lot of applause. He also got a lot of laughs, like saying, Keir Starmer's the Blair without the flair, and he was the only politician not to use an auto cue. He knew how to make a mockery of them.
I
But I
mean,
don't.
he didn't have to try to make a mockery
Mm,
of them. I mean, they were doing pretty job of mocking themselves by themselves because everyone was just abysmal. Uh, they seemed like they had almost zero prep work. So yeah, it wouldn't take that much effort to ridicule them.
mm. No, absolutely. I also noticed as well how Penny Mordaunt didn't get. I don't think she got any applause for anything.
Penny Morgan is the trigger happy one about the nuke, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
And I mean, most of the debates he was arguing with the one next to her. and they often were getting in a tangent between them, which I found was quite annoying because rather than answering the questions, one was they were pretty much arguing with one another.
Yep.
I think
Just
one, the other one must have been the representative from the Conservatories Party. I think I can't remember,
just
but yeah.
oh, oh yeah. Just the last couple of points from me as well. Just in that one as well, Rayna did actually silence Morgan once when she said that people were being because the Tories do seem to have this philosophy of bringing lots of people overseas will fix the economy. I think that's what's driving it. And she said something very astute, which was that people are being brought in from overseas because they have skill sets that the UK population don't have because of a gap and a lack of policy for training, the UK population in these said skill sets. And the Tory have set this as a fucking standard, and they're not wanting to do anything about it. They've offered some tokenistic policies like have degrees that revolve around professional qualifications. Okay, that's fine, but we used to have modern apprenticeships for that, where you didn't get taught in a fucking classroom. You went out on the job and learnt it. There are some things that even when it comes to if you want to be a plumber or electrician, you can learn the basics in the classroom, but you still have to be taught by someone in a working environment on how to apply it. If that makes sense, there's much more success, and when it comes to those kinds of trades with modern apprenticeships than in university. By all means, create academic qualification around them. I'm not against that. I'm all for it if it gets people into trades that they want. If it gets, I'm all for qualifications being a piece of paper that are useful, regardless of what they're for getting someone into the job they want and being able to do it, For some jobs, university is the right one, like being a teacher or being an engineer, because there's a lot to learn in that. There's a lot to learn in any, I don't know why I say that, there's a lot to learn in any profession. But it's very tokenistic to just say, oh, well, we'll have degrees in this, this, and this. You're still not changing the funding. You're still not creating an easy access. It makes no difference having these degrees in university to teach people how to use to get into these professions. What doesn't help is if they don't have access to them, So there should be more access to these kinds of things. There should be more funding put into them. And I think that's where the Tories have broken down. There's nothing in place to help people with this kind of thing. So Penny Mordaunt couldn't really build a response to it. And the other thing as well was just when we were talking about Farage getting called out as a snake oil salesman, and Penny Mordaunt as well clamped up saying Brexit was a success because the Tories are just as knee deep in it as Farage is. It was rightfully claimed that £40 billion worth of taxes that were taken out of the economy because of Brexit.
Yeah, I can see that happening because we still don't know to this day exactly what the deals that they signed were and what sort of economic effect they had on us. We just see prices rising, and taxes rising, but the exact amount of and the exact details of the Brexit deals that they signed, I personally haven't heard of them, and I don't know what they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in a similar position. If that's true, it's a big blow. But Farage couldn't really refute it, and neither could Mordaunt. So, there is that. But I think the hope there was just let him say the remark and let it breeze by. Let's be honest, the people who believe in Brexit, the holdouts, they're not going to change their mind. Even after everything that's happened, the people who've changed their mind on Brexit have already changed their mind. This is going to sound unbelievably harsh, but this is kind of just how voting demographics actually work. It wasn't all the elderly who voted for Brexit, but it was a huge chunk of them. And one of the big concerns that Brexit holdouts have is about another referendum is that a lot of the people who voted to leave the EU have actually passed away. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying factually. Again, this is how voting demographics actually change. This is part of the process. It's how society moves on and changes. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the better. Just being objective when I say this. A lot of people who voted for Brexit, who were elderly, they passed away, and a lot of people did. And a lot of the younger people who are now old enough to vote are pro getting back into the EU. And that's what a lot of Brexiteers are frightened of with another referendum. The demographics have changed. So that's why they're scared of another referendum, which is why they don't really like to talk about Brexit now. They like to treat it as just this thing that's happened. You don't like it, we do. Can't do anything about it. So that's why they tend to not get involved in the discussions now in these debates. Aside from not wanting to talk about the one thing failure that it is. What do you think?
It's definitely interesting, and yeah, the demographics are supposed to change because really you are supposed that's the only way you can bring change really.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you would be voting the same thing again and again and again, and
Yeah,
you would end up in stagnation, which, surprise, surprise,
yeah.
it's what we have today. Now, much like the EU, I don't think personally rejoining would be good for the economy because they would make an example of us, and we would end up having a lot more. It would cause a lot more damage to the economy than good.
Mm.
Especially now with the what's happening with Ukraine, the latest European sort of council or whatever meeting. They voted that now the quote unquote tax for Zelensky is mandatory for every country of NATO. So every country of
Oh,
NATO is forced to send ammunition and
mm.
aid packages. So
It.
that's going to be interesting.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but it's not going to help. The lines in Ukraine are already
No, no, it's not
collapsing,
going
if
to
not
help.
already.
But if we were part of the EU, we would
Mm.
force to send even more on a very
Hmm.
challenging period for us, where
Hmm.
everything is degrading. So yeah, it might sound harsh to say this,
Mm.
but we cannot afford to look out when we cannot fix our own problems.
True. The
Like
thing
you're
about
talking
the
about the war in Ukraine when you
mm,
have shitloads of people dying on the street
yeah,
out of hunger.
that's
So
true.
yeah, I think rejoining the EU at this stage would be more damaging. But at the
There's
same time, having a changing, a gradually, sorry, not gradually, but having something that a demographic that changes their mind is important for politics to go forward because times are changing and a lot of the older people have opinions and a mindset that is not necessarily in accordance to today's standards
mm,
of what should be right. And this is also one of the reasons why you have so many incompetent people in power.
mm,
So I think it
yeah,
is important. I think it works in our favor to a degree
mm,
that we have a change in demographic. It also has its negatives because
yeah,
at the same time saying that education being worse and worse over the years
mm,
causes the newer generations to be far more uneducated with
mm,
even less judgment and critical thinking, which result in even poorer options. But it's the case also that there's a lot of people that prefer to just not to vote because they have given up.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that could be a very nice video in its own, like because it's a
mm,
big topic and there's a lot to discuss and cover. But yeah, that's my general sort of thoughts and opinions on this.
mm. I think the last thing I would just say really on the EU thing as well are a couple of things. The one is there's no way we could join the EU again anyway because the EU would make an absolute example out of the UK to prevent others through fear from leaving. To say this is what happens when you leave and you end up begging to come back. I mean, we're
Yeah,
still in
exactly.
anyway, but to get back into
That's
the
what
common
I
market.
said. Yeah,
Um,
it would be catastrophic.
yep. And the other thing is, even with that, if you were without that, there's always going to be positives and negatives to being in the EU. And I'm just speaking from the context of when we were in the EU. And when we were in the EU, there were a lot of positives. You know, guaranteed minimum wage. The Tories, by the way, have said in the past when they've been in power they'd like to get rid of the minimum wage if they thought they could get away with it. The EU prevented them from doing that because the EU has its own minimum wage. Things like a lot of people's sick benefits, your right to go on the sick and things like that in the contracts, they come from EU laws, not UK. So a lot of the benefits we had in the workplace came from EU regulations and requirements, which is why a lot of businesses wanted to get out of the EU because they didn't like paying for those kinds of benefits that we had. So there are always going to be positives and negatives. And when it came to leaving, for me, the negatives far outweigh the positives. But it would be mad to go back in unless we could get decent conditions, even if it was just the same ones that we went back in under. I would go for that. But if I was to go back into the EU, I wouldn't blindly go back in. I would like to know what the conditions are and what the prices we pay would be, if that makes sense to do so.
Yeah, It does make sense.
Yeah.
And as you said, yeah, I would reluctant to rejoin the EU. As good as it is in principle,
Mm.
and I agree with a lot of stuff. At the same time, yeah, I think rejoining would be catastrophic for us
Mm.
at the moment,
Yep.
for the reasons that you mentioned.
Hmm. Fair enough. I don't really have much else to say really on the debates. There was a lot more that went in them, but we only have a time limit, so we could only pick out some of the highlights. Yeah, have you got anything else you want to add?
No, I pretty much covered and said everything I want to say.
Cool. If that's the case. That's this episode wrapped up. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next week, guys. Bye for now.
Enjoy.
Don't forget your voting IDs.